is to form a highly interactive view of God and the world. God not only affects the world has an effect on God. And God is sensitive to and deeply affected by all that happens in it. In contrast to process theists, open theists maintain that God is ontologically distinct from the world. The world depends on God for its existence, but God does not depend on the world for God. God's care for the world is therefore appropriately characterized as one of canonic laws, a self-giving, self-sacrificing, freely chosen law. Open theists differ among themselves as to whether the canonic love for the world is a permanent feature of the divine experience. In other words, they disagree as to whether the world is co-eternal with God or whether it had a beginning. For some open theists, there has always been a world alongside God, because canonic law is essential to the divine character, and canonic love requires the permanent existence of a creaturely world as its object. As they see it, therefore, creation is the natural and therefore necessary expression of divine love. My contention is that creation is the natural but not necessary expression of divine love. And I find the concept of creation ex nihilo helpful in explaining this. I have a couple of paragraphs on the origin of this, but I'll pass on that. A familiar line of argument in favor of creation ex nihilo is that it preserves God's ontological self-sufficiency and unilateral power over the world. If God and world are co-eternal, God and world are equally necessary, and God is not ultimate. As one supporter puts it, biblical characterizations of God's freedom to act in and over the world require an absolute qualitative distinction between creator and creation. And creation ex nihilo preserves this by designating a creative act in the purest sense of the word. While power-based arguments for creation ex nihilo have a certain value, they raise a number of questions, and my previous three speakers have certainly called attention to them. So I believe we give the notion of further footing, not by appealing to divine power, but by appealing to divine love. It is precisely because God's preeminent characteristic is self-giving love that God brings into existence a reality other than God's self, a world totally dependent on God's free decision both to sustain and to initiate its existence. Viewed as an expression of divine love, creation ex nihilo says something important about both creator and creation. In line with Bronner's famous dictum regarding the economic and infinite Trinity, creation ex nihilo reminds us that God's relation to creation is consistent with and revelatory of what God has always been. It affirms the Christian vision of God as a complex reality inherently and within itself, social, relational, temporal, and yet contingent. On the one hand, it means that God does not need something other than God in order for God's loving nature to find fulfillment. Because God's own life exhibits all these qualities, the creaturely world is not required to account for any of them. God's activity does not fulfill some divine obligation or meet some metaphysical or moral necessity on God's part. On the other hand, creation is a perfectly natural expression of God's love. Since God's own reality is characterized by the affirmation of the other, we see in God's decision to create, and in God's care for and commitment to what God creates, a vivid reflection of the one whose nature is to embrace the other. So the world exists as a perfectly natural extension of the love that characterizes the inner life of God as a loving society. But even though God's decision to create is fully consistent with God's essential character, it was neither necessary nor inevitable. It was something God freely chose to do, and this is something important about the world. It reminds us that the sheer existence of the world is due to divine grace. The world has no claim on God other than God's freely chosen commitment to it. For process makers and for some open theists, divine love is inconceivable in the absence of a creaturely world. So unless the world exists necessarily, we cannot think of God as essentially loving. If there is a world only because God chose to create it, they argue, then God's love for the world does not express God's innermost fundamental reality. It is merely incidental to God's nature. To the contrary, I believe, the notion of a world whose very existence is contingent argues for, rather than against, divine love. Although creation is a choice, not a necessity for God, this does not lessen the world's value. Instead, it shows how important the world is to God. After all, a freely chosen commitment can express one's deepest character every bit as much as one that is inevitable. For many people, having children is a choice, not a necessity. But this hardly makes their children incidental to their identity. Moreover, God's commitment to a world that owes its existence entirely to the fact that God freely chose to create it as a new shade or color to the spectrum of God's love. The love that radiates within the Trinity involves an affirmation of equals, the embrace of others who fully deserves the affection it receives. In contrast, God's love for the creaturely world involves affirming something that has value only because God has freely chosen to bring it into existence and embrace it within God's own light. This does not mean that God's creative activity is purely arbitrary, nor does creation appear to be independent of God's light, nor does it mean that the world lacks its own integrity, nor that the value of the world is negligible. To the contrary, far from diminishing the value of creation, the concept of creation ex nihilo enhances it. There is nothing matter of fact about the world God created. The truth that its very existence is a matter of sheer grace makes it a cause for wonder.